Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for coming to this last session of the day. We are almost done. It's been fun. Thank you for coming to all the Agile talks, this one included. The only thing I'd ask is that you use your app to rate and review your speakers. It's really, really helpful for them. I'm really excited about this talk specifically. This remote plus Agile conversation seems to be something that I can't stop having with people. Everyone wants to talk about it, and I think it's funny because one of these Agile principles that we have kind of makes us think that we can't do it. So there seems to be so many people talking about it, and instead of hearing from a Gartner report or something like that about remote work, let's hear from some people that actually do it every day. I'm really excited to welcome Jordan, who's done so much work to kind of bring us inside of his world. So please join me in welcoming Jordan.
Thank you. Right. Around 2014, there's about 22 people working for Trello out of the HQ. And around that same time, we were seeing some amazing growth. So it's really starting to take off. And of course, everybody at the team was a very valuable member. Around the same time, a developer called Brett said to the rest of the team, "I'm leaving. I'm going to live in Hawaii with my family." So a discussion started to happen about how they could continue to work together. And the team said, "Brett, you go over there, and we'll work something out. Let's try out this remote thing, okay?" And so processes started to be in place, and eventually more and more workers were able to work remotely. It started with the developers, but it expanded eventually to other teams as well. And finally, the HR team, our people team, picked up, and they started to implement a remote-first company culture. And that's exactly what I'm here to talk about today, how we use that and how we also implemented it in our Agile teams. So it's really worked for us because since then we went from 4 to about 35 million registered users. The team has continued to scale, and today, only in the US, there's more than 150 people working as employees. We have a tremendous geodiversity, which has also helped us to build an international product. Trello is today available in more than 20 languages. And we continue to grow with Atlassian, the bigger Atlassian family, after acquisition. And today our workforce is a hybrid co-located majority remote team. About 55% of our employees in the US are working from home, or they have that set as their office location, home. And it's a remote-first company culture. When I say that, I mean that if one person is remote, everyone is remote. And we've found that that is the best way to build an inclusive culture at Trello. Right. So, as you can see, far left over there is Brett out in Hawaii, and far right, that's me, sitting out in Spain. So I've actually come over from Spain. I work and live in Valencia, east coast of Spain. And so we're spread out over 3 continents, Europe, North America, and South America. And so we managed to really create a diverse company with people from different countries, different cultural backgrounds, and the workspace flexibility that we offer as well actually makes us diverse in a sense of we have a lot of working parents, which is quite strange for a young tech company. And it's been like that since we were a startup, so since we started out. This is us at one of our offsites. So we do actually get together. But when we get together, it's mostly to have fun. So if we have to get together to get our daily job stuff done, it means that the system is broken. What we've done is, despite having diverse backgrounds, we have a solid relationship between all the members. We humanize our communication in every interaction, and we learn how to communicate well in this environment. And then, of course, we pick the tools that best support that. One learning that we have, which has been massive, is that we need to embrace openness. transparency has been key for us to create an inclusive and a remote culture. But why remote work? I think we need to do this reflection in the first place. First of all, it's about hiring. So I discussed about Brett leaving. That was an issue for us because we really wanted to retain our talent. But we also, as we grow, need to hire the best talent. And if we only be relying on New York, where our HQ is, we'd be limited. So we have less geographic limitations with remote workers. We're also, in general, moving away from a culture where we're moving away, like we're sitting in an office, in a space, and we're getting paid for our presence, not for what you produce or your results. And that requires a tremendous mindset shift. So we can focus on our goals and accomplish them more easily at Trello. And lastly, we're seeing increased productivity. So processes and decisions are often better documented because they need to be shared across locations by default. So a digital paper trail is created almost automatically. And there is a myth about remote workers. I'll speak about a few myths today, but one is that we sit at home, we do the remote thing, quotation, but in fact, we're scratching our backs, watching Netflix, and sitting in pajama. But it's actually true that because we have more control over our environment, we're actually more productive. And then as well, this flexibility is giving us increased happiness as well. And before I came in, I did a little research internally, a survey to more people on our Agile teams. And I asked them, what is remote work bringing to you at your work? And the answers were quite similar, but I pulled this paragraph from Jason, from our activation team, a colleague of mine. And I just wanted to read it out loud because it really, you're starting to see a few patterns that you recognize as well in the Agile teams. So we have the flexibility to work different hours in different locations. We have shared empathy around remote working challenges. Since we're all remote, we get opportunities to travel and see each other a few times a year. So you're probably starting to see some words here that might relate to how Agile teams are also built. So you have flexibility, you have empathy around the work. You also have things like enjoyment to sit and work together or get together and have fun, right? You'll see these things again and again coming back in throughout my presentation today. But how do we do it? This is on a company level. You can't assume that all people know how to work remotely. So you need to have some guidelines. Call it rules, call it whatever you want. For instance, before I started at Trello, I was a freelancer. And I would go to my weekly meetings with my clients. Then I would go home, I would work on my assignments, and after a week, I'd come back and we would have our meetings again. And there was fairly little communication happening in between those meetings. But with remote work, that all changes. And since I joined Trello, I've definitely seen a completely different dynamic. But let's look a little bit closer at those rules. So first of all, you have to assume remote. It's all or nothing, and that will feel everyone included. Secondly, think about giving your remote employees a dedicated space. So you have to introduce remote perks. For instance, someone at your office might get free lunches, whereas your remote worker, you could pay for their internet. If they prefer to go to a co-working space, then you should also consider to pay for that. In my case, since I had a baby 2 years ago, I chose personally to go out of my home office and go to a co-working space. And that's worked really well for me. It's also about how your employees are most productive. So try to introduce those perks to help them out. Of course, give them the proper tools. What can I say? Give them Trello. I'm from Trello. No, but in general, give them the tools that support this environment, that collaborative environment. Get them the stuff they need to get the stuff done. And of course, they should have high internet speed at all times. Over-communicate. Yes, there's another myth around remote workers that we're introverts. But the fact is that we actually become expert communicators. So in this remote environment, if you feel that you're over-communicating, you're probably communicating the right amount. Then you have annual team offsites. So we get together, we have face-to-face time, and we also have some team overlap. I'll come back to some of these whilst I talk about remote Agile team. So let's zoom in on the Agile teams a bit. So today, we've come a long way in general of how we approach projects. Our talent is distributed. In fact, you might not be aware of it, but actually 71% of Agile teams are actually distributed in some way because they're working with consultants, external teams, offshore teams, etc. The processes are agile and iterative. The teams are self-organized, and the economics are optimized. So the entire chain of leadership, management, and knowledge workers actually managing a completely different level of information. So we're giving that sort of level of transparency into the team. And that's very different from what it was like before. Co-located teams, same company, same office space, and the project management processes were very rigid, right? However, there are some challenges ahead. And I pulled two big ones today that I wanted to talk about. One of them is communication. So with the lack of face-to-face communication across different time zones, as we start expanding around the globe, we're also seeing more factors like different languages, different cultural backgrounds, and all of that can lead to misunderstandings. We're also breaking one of the key principles of Agile with distributed teams, and that is to have face-to-face time in a co-located space. The most efficient and effective method of conveying information to and within a development team is face-to-face conversation. That's straight out of the Agile manifesto. So you'll find very, very little documentation around this. Okay, how can we overcome this challenge of communication? Well, first of all, let's look a little bit closer at time zones. So this would be your normal kind of structure of a co-located team. You get in the morning, you have coffee with your mates, talk a little bit about what are you going to work on, how was your weekend, you go to work, you have some FaceTime meetings, some more handshakes between developers, you go to lunch, more social time, back to work, meetings, etc. And then maybe around Thursday or Friday, you all go out for a beer, right? So you socialize and stuff. So you have to be very, very conscious about this in this environment. And we've sold out at Trello by having 4 hours of overlap. So we have 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. at Trello, we all get online. And that has worked really well for us because during this time, we can have those real-time collaboration moments. We can have face-to-face conversations or meetings, right? And the rest of the day, we have flexibility to get organized the way we want. So for instance, my time, 12 to 4 p.m. Eastern time means that I don't have to be online or sit in front of a computer strictly because I'm going to be alone and I have the flexibility during the whole morning. And so I can really find a way to have that work-life balance that I really need. Then I might sit up and work a little bit later. But in the mornings, I plan to do my personal stuff. And this gives the freedom to move away from the traditional 9-to-5 schedule and perhaps structure the way in the day with more flexibility and efficiency for a given task as well. Right, our one-on-ones. One-on-ones are super important. So one-on-ones is where you discuss with your manager, you reflect on the workload, you understand your priorities well, and you talk about career goals. But we have also introduced a bigger discussion in our one-on-ones about remote work. What does mean is basically that we talk more and more about how you feel like working remotely. So with your manager, you should be able to talk about, are you feeling lonely? Is this remote thing working for you? Right? And have that discussion continuously. So you have a check-in with each person on regular intervals, and you talk about remote work. And we use one of these fancy Trello boards. I'll come back to Trello later in case you're not familiar with it. But this is the one we use for our one-on-ones. Okay, let me talk a little bit about team rituals. So I've picked the ones that we use for our activation team. I'm a PMM on the activation team. And so the way we do our stand-ups are async. So you come in the morning at your own time. You talk about the 3 things that you achieved yesterday, 3 things that you're planning to achieve today, and anything that might stand in the way. So any blockers as well. It's all async. During the day, you can then have deeper developer-to-developer handshakes if you need to. But with that, you should be able to go up and do your work. Second thing is we have weekly sync meetings. So normally we have our meetings are on a Monday. We review running experiments. We change the allocation or pause. We size new work together. We assign and commit to working for the upcoming week. At the end of our meeting, we do is have hangout time. So on our video, we stay on for another half an hour, and we just chat. We talk about, how was your weekend? Where have you been? How was your holidays? What films have you been watching? And it's to create bonding time, to compensate for those moments that we don't get in a physical office. In our team retrospective, we evaluate work that needs starting, stopping, and continues. But the second part of our meetings is to give kudos and bravos. So this is another important thing to do in a sort of a less physical world. We have to get visibility to the great work that people are doing. So with the kudos and bravos, we have a list of people we want to thank and acknowledge the good work for during the week. And then we talk about that in a meeting. We have design huddles every second week as well to get aligned on problem spaces. We use very collaborative tools for that, so digital virtual blackboards, for instance, like Mural, that help us to collaborate on these things. Team backlog grooming, we provide details for upcoming work, we designate feature leads for upcoming projects, and we do that about every 2 weeks. And lastly, we have Triad Sync. So Triad Sync is complementary to a product ownership or product management. With the Triad Sync, what we do is not the full time, not the full team, but it's design, product manager, product marketing manager, and engineering manager get together to discuss about what we're doing right to meet our objectives, or what we're doing wrong as well. But we set aside a specific meeting to get face time and make the right decisions. Right, let's talk a little bit about tools. So this is pretty much our stack. I assume that you get the picture pretty much. But what is important for us is that we go for simplicity and have a clear approach to how we use each tool. So we don't mix Slack with where we track the work, for instance. Key information goes on Trello. And of course, we want our tools to kind of have the collaborative features, like being able to mention people, being able to tag. Those are very, very important features for us. And they should also be quite visual. For us, that works well. And in general, we should have an articulated purpose for our tools. We can't assume that everyone uses tools the same way. We should have regular check-ins. So that means that we encourage an open dialogue on the team health around the tools. We have flexibility, so we really encourage people to go in and fix the tools or anything that needs improvement. And lastly, we like to have fun. So we build in water cooler moments into our tools. That means that we have chat channels at Slack that are just dedicated to interests. For instance, we have a channel for kids, we have a channel for sports, for cooking, etc. And that also helps us bond as team. And that has been one of the key learnings for how we expand also, we build our tool, Trello. So we're really saying that collaborative tools are social places. And it's about recreating that empathy stuff that humans really need. And we're at a point where we're beginning to recreate the stuff that people get from physically going to work. And as part of our product principles at Trello, we're of course doing something that is flexible, visible, collaborative, but we also have fun as part of the principles. And that's exactly because of that. We need to give people a way to express themselves exactly the way they would express themselves in today's other communication tools like WhatsApp, like Facebook, like Twitter. And that's why last year, around February, we launched emoticons and reactions. About video meetings. So we use video for strengthening our relationship. It's extremely important for us. We do fully remote meetings. And now going back to a little bit the remote first culture is basically if there's 10 people in a meeting room and one person is remote, we all get our own screen. For us, that has worked really, really well to build that inclusive culture. Technically, we should, of course, always be prepared to get on video. That means that we should have links at hand, the best tool. We use Zoom. We love Zoom for that. We have fancy backgrounds because it's kind of, part of the culture. If you're going to see people a lot on video, you want to build out a nice little office and background. But more than that, it's also about jumping on video when you need to get clarity. So if you feel like there is a disconnect with someone, we immediately jump on video. Imagine in your own personal life, you and your partner having a discussion over WhatsApp, right? You continue to write, and it just becomes like this really, really bad place to be in. What would you do? You would jump on a call, right? Or you would meet in person. So this is the same place, the same thing. For us, video is a little bit about that as well. Chat. We all love chat, but we also have to be conscious about making chat better for remote. So even though we love it a lot, it can also be a very distracting place to be in, right? So we have to be mindful about mentioning people in DMs because people are across different time zones. And especially in the bigger groups where you get people from all around the world, we keep the @channels at the minimum, right? We also use, in our chat tools, we also provide constantly a lot of context in our messages, and we use threads when we can. So why is this? Because for us, context is really king. If someone comes in a few hours later and want to pick up on a conversation, they should be able to relate to that constantly. So threads and giving context to your messages is extremely, really important. Okay, so you're starting to see a little bit of a pattern here, I guess. But async is a big thing in remote. Because that's actually where we get the work done. We make our decisions there. We're referencing past work decisions, and we put our learnings there. And it's totally okay to do your work async. So I guess you could say that to the right, you would have tools like Jira, Trello, Confluence, and to your left, you would have video and chat. And one of the single most looked after skill that I see amongst hiring managers in the Agile world is that they look after that you can write well in this context. It's about, obviously, knowing how to spell and put the commas in the right place, but it's about expressing yourself with clarity. And it's not just that, it's also how you communicate with your tool, with your team. For instance, if your team is a bit younger and they are fluent in GIFs, for instance, you should also be able to communicate that way. So managers are really looking after how you express yourself in a written way. Okay, we've covered communication, but let's go a little bit deeper. Let's look at about making remote Agile teams sustainable in the long run. And so this might be a little bit controversial, but I think it's more and more accepted. And today, people are coming up with their own methodology. So once you know the principles, the rules, the values, you know which rules you can break. So you create your own methodology, because in the end of the day, it's something that you come up for your product and for your company. So my team, for instance, we move at a constant pace. We pick up work pretty much like Kanban. We don't track velocity, but we do keep an eye on our capacity, so we ship constantly. And that's worked for us. But more importantly, once you've figured out what that methodology is, then reinforce it. Have a facilitator, have a coach, have a master, and continuously have a reflection on what is working and what isn't. And once you've figured it out, reinforce it. The second thing is about having a right team structure. So it's about minimizing the impact of distribution. So you might want to consider is to not have all your developers in one country, in one location, speaking the same languages, for instance, and being away from other parts of the team. Because that can lead to silos. And silos are going to be your enemy in a remote environment. You'll have one directional information flows, and that will end in the blame game. And of course, once you sorted that out, you should then think about optimizing your time zones, having the right place, and so forth. And the third one is to actually create a collaborative culture. So you have to encourage that. You want to expand the knowledge base. So arrange face-to-face interactions with a dedicated offsite. I know that sounds expensive, but you're going to get a lot of bang for your buck for it. Have frequent demos and retros. And at Atlassian, we're very lucky to be able to spend 20% of our time on innovation. And that's also a good way for us to learn how to collaborate with a bigger team and different team members. So every 5th week, we will take our sort of like recurrent work, put it aside, and we will dedicate that time purely on new things. And that also takes us out of our comfort zone. And of course, to be more collaborative, use the right tools. Foster personal connections. So for social time and building your community, you have to be extremely intentional about it. I wanted to mention a research project by Google. It was called Project Aristotle. And the findings were astonishing because what they found was that the factors that influence a great team is not the individual IQ of its member, it's not the aggregate IQ, it's not the leadership, and in fact, it's not the proximity either of its members. It's empathy. It's about having psychological safety, right? So, you have to really work on that empathy around your members. And a great way to do that, again, is to get together in offsites. Because those offsites will bring you an amazing momentum and enthusiasm and propose you for months after that. And then you can go away and do your work remotely. And in the end of the day, it's about trust. So trust means that you rely on someone else to do the right thing. And when your team members feel safe with each other, they feel comfortable to open up, to take appropriate risks and expose vulnerabilities. So trust is essential to an effective team because it provides that sense of safety. Right. The last part here is that you should define your standards of done. So you also need to cultivate a commitment to quality and delivery. So reward people who demonstrate an eye for quality and are willing to take ownership of and responsibility for a project to an end. For instance, at Trello, for our activation team, we have a checklist, very clear. So we have a QA kickoff to evaluate risk. We identify and fix bugs, of course. We need to get those translations in place, more than 20 languages. We do our testing, we have design review, and then we have plenty of demos. Right. I wanted to quickly show you how we do it with Trello. And how many people use Trello in the room? Oh, quite a few of you. Okay, for those of you who don't, I just want to say that Trello is a visual collaboration tool that creates a shared perspective on any project in a fun, flexible, and rewarding way. And what you see is a board, and then it had lists and cards. So in the case of a Trello Kanban board, this means that you can easily set up a series of lists that signify the different steps a task needs to undergo to get done. And you're then moving it from left to right to completion. Right. In our to-do list, we have prioritize work that needs to get done. So things in here have already been researched. We have some mocks, we have some metrics, and we have an expected behavior that we've evaluated from our users. We pick up work by adding a member, then we move the task to doing. So doing is a work in progress list. At least one item in this state should be there per engineer. Then we implement a spec doc and have a QA kickoff. And once you believe that you've met the requirements and testing notes for your issue, we then attach our pull request. We're in a space of code review. So this is a list of items that where we need to address the code review feedback. When it's gotten approval, we move it to verifying. So once we have our PR approved, we can go into verifying. And this is where QA is done, and we're fixing that things that QA finds. So we add a team tester, we have a design review also in this space, and if too many cards are here, we might be bottlenecked on QA time. In awaiting releases, we've merged our PR, but it hasn't been released to customers yet as an experiment or as part of a standard release. But once we do that, if it's an experiment, it goes into our running list. And if it's anything else than an experiment, it goes to done. Okay, that was pretty manual, but with Butler, one of our power-ups, that just joined our Trello team, by the way, we can automate some of these things and set rule automation and schedule commands. So for instance, imagine that you wanted to create a checklist automatically to a card in a list. Well, Butler can do that for you. For instance, if you have a priority label, you add it to your card, that card can move up to the top of that list. You can add a reviewer and set a due date. So Butler will all that stuff automatically for you. You can customize your boards more to Agile. So with our power-ups from Trello, Team Gantt, and Hello Epics, you can have stuff like burn down charts, story points, timelines, and card relationship. Okay, I wanted to step back a bit and then not talk about just Agile, but we do a few more things that I think is in your interest on a Trello company level. So we get our new members up to speed quickly, and we get everyone on the same page by using these few boards. Employee boarding. So we have this template that we copy for each one of the new employees. And so they have to go through a to-do list. And in this board, you will find stuff like remote policies, people you need to reach out to get set up, and anyone who can give you the right tools, and passwords and so forth. And then, at the end of this board, we have a directory of the people that you're going to work with. And it's something that I really like when I joined Trello, because at my own time, I could go through this directory and get to know the people that I was going to work with. And so we included information here, like where they're working, what time zones they're in, what their interests are, but then also things like what their preferred communication channel is. So for instance, if you want to reach out to a salesperson at Trello, they might be more likely to answer your emails. Whereas if you go to a developer, they'll probably not look at their emails much during the day, and you'll have to go out and reach out to them during Slack. The other one that we use is a company overview board. So this board makes sure that we are on track and meeting our goals. So this is every Friday, our team go in and they update a card. And all those high-level updates go into a Slack channel. And for us, this is key to how we build and have a transparent culture at Trello. Our town halls at Trello are absolutely amazing. Can you imagine 200 people on their own screen in a video conference? Well, it's fascinating, I tell you that. But this is where we do big announcements. We talk about accomplishments. We introduce new employees. And all of these sessions are recorded. So you can also watch them in your own time. At the end of our town halls, we have breakout sessions. So this is something that the modern communication tools are incorporating into the functionality, like Zoom. After one of these meetings, we are paired up in groups of 3 and 4 randomly, and we could just spend time with our people that we rarely meet, perhaps. And also a way to bond with the team and meet new members. Another thing we do during the town hall is that our CEO, the founder of Trello, Michael Pryor, he'll read out a list. It's a little bit about the commandments around Trello. And number 5 of this list is something that I really like as well. It says, if you see something that's broken, don't do nothing. So that means that we are really encouraging our employees to go out and fix things. And it gives that sort of sense of autonomy and confidence that you need in a great team. Knowledge sharing. I said in the beginning, or when we were talking about the time zones, that you'll have some informal conversations around a coffee break or after the beer. So you don't get those with distributed teams, right? So you have to make up for them. So why don't you give your employees a platform to talk about what they're working on? At Trello, we have a thing called Coffee Talks, and it's an informal environment where we broadcast live exactly that. An employee talks about what they're working on. Those sessions are also recorded. And they look a little bit like this. So this is our Trello HQ, and then everybody else is remote. Okay, coming to the last session. I have some takeaways for you. Working from home is not remote work. You might have seen that from what I've said today, but it requires processes. It needs buy-in from everyone, so everybody has to see some sort of value. You need a shared empathy around remote working challenges and flexibility and willingness to constantly improve. And remember, it's not for everyone. Get the right tools. Now, you might argue and say, tools come second. Yes, that's totally right. Think about what I said today. Go out, create your own Agile methodology. But once you have that, once you set up your team, go out and find the right tools that support that. Keep it simple and have an articulated purpose. Make time for FaceTime. Build those connections. And emphasize on creating empathy between members to build that trust that you need. And check in constantly with your team members. So use your one-on-ones, as I said. How is this working for you? Do you feel lonely? Do you feel connected? Constantly talk about it. And lastly, you're not alone. I know this might be challenging. You think it's a massive step to take to go remote. But we're seeing more and more companies taking the remote approach. And they're all documenting and writing about it. And in fact, remote work is a trend worldwide. And it's not just companies that are doing it. It's larger communities. You're seeing cities, states, even countries starting to encourage this because it's a way to avoid brain drain. It's about keeping your talent in your city. So you have more and more. You're definitely not alone. You don't have to work it out on your own. These are only some of the companies that are already embracing remote in some form. I'm sure you recognize some of the logos on here. And we at Trello also have many resources for you. So we have a playbook around remote work. You can find it at trello.com/teams. And last year, we had a tremendous success with one of our remote work ebooks. It was downloaded more than 250,000 times. And that's also available for you. Thank you very much.